you can be anti-war as much as you like, but another nation doesn't have that point of view. We have the luxury at the moment in the UK and in the West of sort of being able to sit back and see all these other countries descending into larger scale conflicts.
5 years into Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, the battlefield has completely transformed, and with it so has the portrait of Ukraine's typical foreign fighter. Today we're going to be joined by Henri, a 28-year-old drone operator in Azov's International Battalion, originally hailing from the United Kingdom. Joining Azov in spring 2025, Henri spent several months flying drones on positions in some of the hottest areas in the Donbas front line before he was wounded, leading to the amputation of one of his feet. Since then, though, he's undergone rehabilitation and is preparing to head straight back to the front line, but not before speaking to us, together with his dog, Beef.
This is Beef, my dog. It's like beef steak. It was actually Beef Wellington I was called after, but no one here knows what a Beef Wellington is, so beef steaks is a much more common thing to see on the menu here, so.
Is he a Donbas dog, or is he?
No, he's a Kyiv dog, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people think I brought him from the UK because he looks very British, but he's a Kyiv born and bred dog.
I just want to start by giving the audience a chance to get to know you. Who is Henri? Who was he before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine?
Yeah, I think I was fairly standard sort of British guy. I had a few different varying jobs. I started when I was 16, working in shipping, and then I worked in like a corporate world for a short while in London. Did brokering, like selling, working with crude oil and all this kind of stuff.
Like a finance bro.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. At the start of the full scale, actually, I was working in this corporate job in as a broker, and I remember it coming on the news. I actually got in trouble for spending too much time looking at the news. This was the first few days of the invasion.
Monitoring the situation.
Yeah, I was monitoring the situation hard from my office, and I got in trouble for it. I was like a trainee broker at the time, and you've got to be like on the Excel like spreadsheet. You can't take your eyes off it. So I got in trouble for monitoring the situation too much, and I thought, like, wow, this is what for me. I thought this is like such a big event that we should all be like concerned about or involved in as much as possible. And I started then to think about things I could do to help. I
think like talking to foreign fighters, their motivation is often like very varying. Sometimes it's purely this understanding that this is the right thing to do. A lot of people are coming at it with this pure like moral calling that like Ukraine is where I need to be. I need to defend this country against a fascist aggressor. If they've got previous military experience, they feel like they need to put that to use. But then other people are kind of maybe looking for themselves a little bit. Some people are maybe like running away from something. What was it in your case?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. It's one that I've thought about since I came. I mean, when I first came over, I was coming because I had always thought that I might be able to do something that would help. So I did some volunteering at first, and then there was a point I realized that I can actually do more. Like, I'm young and fit and able-bodied and probably able to learn new skills quickly. So once I realized that I could be more useful as a soldier here or serving in the armed forces, then I sort of had to come. Like, I realized that it's something I had to do. I could do more, and I was able to do more, and didn't really have an excuse to not come and do more.
So just going back to when you were looking at the Ukrainian armed forces, you're making this kind of big personal decision to join the military. What made you choose specifically Azov? What was their international kind of foreign component? At that point, it's maybe Ukraine's most famous unit, very politically charged. Sometimes there's the propaganda going back and forth about Azov. Why did you kind of end up being drawn to that specific unit?
The main thing, I suppose, was their vision for forming a professional unit with more of an emphasis on having foreigners as in leadership roles and command roles, and sort of forming a unit that looks after its guys more and plans missions, has more integration with the rest of the brigade, and just overall had a more of a vision for being a useful place to be for foreigners, rather than coming and joining an infantry unit that would maybe not utilize all the skills of foreign volunteers properly. This was the vision in the beginning, and is being part of Azov, because I'd heard of Azov before, but then I looked into it a lot more after I had this information that the 3rd Battalion was forming. So I looked into who they were and how they work, and you can see that they're a very professional brigade, and they have a lot of success. They hold their soldiers to a fairly high standard, and that was the main attraction for me.
It's interesting how a unit which is famed for its like Ukrainian nationalist kind of background and drive, you know, in the face of an existential threat, is then a place where foreigners join. Did you have a kind of connection and understanding of this history of the Ukrainian kind of struggle over the centuries, or did that come with time?
Yeah, that came with after I joined the unit. We have a bit more of an insight into the history of Azov and the history of the struggle of the Ukrainian people, and that's kind of what Azov represents. But you, as a foreigner, you can, if you're committed, you can kind of join this struggle. You'll never be like a Ukrainian in the same way if you've been born and raised in another country, but you can join the fight just the same, and you're involved in the fighting just the same. You're fighting alongside other Azov soldiers, and you get this idea of people who like really fighting for their nation, for their right to exist. And you can sympathize with that as, being from another country.
What did you end up doing as your first job in the military, and why did you choose it, and what was it like?
So, yeah, my first role was a Mavic operator. So it's like a varied drone operator role. You do a lot of ISR stuff. It's like reconnaissance, surveillance, all this stuff. You get a chance to engage the enemy by dropping munitions, and you're also directing artillery, FPVs, all this kind of stuff. So it's a pretty multivariate role as a drone operator. That was my first job, and I went into that in the beginning because when I came in 2025, I just thought that drones are going to be the dominant force on the battlefield, and it's something I wanted to be part of. You get to see the enemy a lot more than other units. For example, you get to see the enemy, you get to engage them, and you get to destroy them. That's what I was most interested in, and we got to do like actual soldiering stuff as well. There's one thing in the beginning that they're very big on. All guys in Azov, traditionally it's an infantry brigade, so they have a big focus on infantry. So you have to keep up your level of fitness, and we practice infantry stuff all the time. And so even drone operators have to have this like infantry mentality, because our positions back then, the drone positions, the Mavic positions, were quite close to enemy positions, and sometimes you'd have to do like small defense of the drone position against infiltrating enemy infantry.
If you don't mind me saying, it's almost like a very like a British way of understating everything. Like, we saw the enemy, we engaged them. It was pretty cool. And sometimes you have to do a small like little firefight against the infiltrating enemy. Like, but that's that's war up close and personal. That's violence. That's killing. That's someone trying potentially, if they make it through to your position, as you mentioned, trying to kill you. Like, how does it really feel at what moment do you really feel like, okay, now this is really war, and this is not a game anymore? Did that moment come with any strong like emotions for you, or are you just like, this is where I was meant to be?
I think it was just something that built up in my head. I already kind of, during the training and learning from other experienced guys, already had a pretty good picture of what it would be like. And again, I was lucky to be on my first position that was that got hit, or we were sort of targeted by artillery and FPVs. I was lucky to be with some very experienced guys who were pretty calm during that, and that meant that I was also pretty calm. So I didn't have like a big moment where I thought, oh, this is war, like what am I doing? I like to think I'd already thought that through before I got to that stage. So it wasn't too bad really. It was sort of like seemed fairly normal. It doesn't take too long for it to become fairly normal. That's one thing that I saw a lot, actually, working with many different people from of huge varied backgrounds. A lot of people we work with are just normal people, and they adapt to war very quickly. They either adapt or they don't. Sometimes people quite naturally don't enjoy being at war or on frontline positions, and they then request to do something else or go home. But my point is that I guess like you can adapt very quickly from a normal person doing like a normal job. You can go to war, and it doesn't take long for it to become just like normal for you, like a normal job. Just a high danger kind of job.
I think it was about a year ago that I was actually working on Mavic positions with the Peaky Blinders unit, which were killing like a dozen Russians per day with Mavics. And like one thing that jumped out to me then is just how you're watching the enemy in such like high definition sometimes. And you see the way they move. Sometimes you even see the expressions on their face. Did anything about who this enemy was, who these Russian soldiers were, like walking forward, like jump out to you? Did you learn something about the human condition?
Yeah, I guess. At the time, it's not good to sort of think too much about it. I guess you see the enemy and they need to be destroyed, and you do all you can to make sure that happens. But yeah, I mean, we're fighting guys from an invading country on Ukrainian soil, like land that we're defending. So yeah, it's just like an objective to just destroy them. You see how they react to absorbing our fire or whatever. Like you see at the end of the day, people fighting and dying, and you get to watch it in high definition, as you say. But it's just part of the job and another evolution of warfare. You're just viewing it now through a different lens rather than through a telescope like the old commanders were doing, like directing their soldiers from the hilltop. We're now just watching through a high definition 4K, like 12 times zoom camera. You're just watching the same thing. So I don't think it makes it more human, although you get to see it, I guess, closer up. I don't think it makes it more human than other wars that have been fought.
Right now, we're out here in the field in eastern Ukraine, and we've just finished filming a very special interview, just the latest in a very, very packed field trip, which has included some very exciting frontline embeds from the hotspots of the fighting. All of this is made possible by your support, specifically that of our community. And this month, we've launched a very special campaign to find 4,000 new members so we can keep doing what we do. If you've ever thought about joining, now is the time. Thank you. You mentioned your injury. I guess, can you tell people like what exactly happened? Was it a typical kind of injury to have?
Last year, towards the end of summer, the position I was on started to get hit a lot more, or was targeted by the enemy. So we went to go and find another position to move to so we could keep working. And we did a small reconnaissance to another position. And on this walk we were on, I stepped on a small anti-personnel mine. Unfortunately, it's quite common out here because there's a huge number of mines in Donbas and along the front, and the enemy can drop them by drones. We were walking on a well-known route between positions, and it's likely that it was dropped by an enemy drone, and that's why they're very difficult to see, especially if they've fallen underneath some foliage or like branches or something like this.
Do you know what type it was? Was it a butterfly?
No, I'm not sure like exactly what type. My friend asked me this, if it was like a PFM1 or 2, but like I don't know. If I'd seen it, I wouldn't have stepped on it. So I don't know what type it was.
Probably a silly question.
No, a lot of people ask this question. It was small enough it took off the bottom of my left foot, like the whole underneath of my foot was gone. And I managed to apply a tourniquet. I had a buddy with me who came and helped me. I called in on the radio, said that we had a casualty, which was me. I was very lucky. It was a couple of hours before nightfall, but I was able to get a vehicle out, get a medevac before it was completely dark. So yeah, it turned out to be fairly okay, and it was the only injury I had. And I went to a field hospital, and they actually saved my foot, mostly saved my foot. And I had the option then to either keep my foot and have like a lot of rehabilitation, because there's you have a lot of nerves in the bottom. The foot is more complicated than the hand, so I'm told, and there's a lot of nerves and bones and all this kind of stuff in there. It's incredibly complicated to rebuild, because it's load bearing as well. So they told me basically I could keep my foot, but I'd probably never be able to run again, maybe have issues with infections in the future and chronic pain and all this kind of stuff. So after 5 or 6 days in hospital, I made the decision to have my foot amputated, and they amputated it a couple of days after that, and then I started the recovery there. The recovery from amputation is much quicker than having your foot rebuilt, and potentially you have a lot more functionality with the prosthetic if it all goes well. And if the rebuilding my foot didn't go well, I'd have to have an amputation anyway, so I opted for the amputation. And yeah, here I am. It's 7 or 8 months, I think, since then, and I'm back working with my guys, with my team, and doing a different role now, but I'm still able to get back into our work and help the guys who are on the front line.
Were you already thinking about when you could get back? When you were like in Lviv, thinking about that decision, did you already make up your mind about rejoining?
Yeah, I was pretty set on it from the outset to go back.
How come? Like normally that's like, you've done your bid and you've paid a pretty serious price at the end of the day.
I think it wasn't super personal for me in the beginning, like when I came to fight here. But now, for me, having my foot blown off, it's like even more of a reason to go back and fight, because it's like actually quite an inconvenience now to have to not have my foot for the rest of my life. So I want to commit to fighting here for longer and do more damage to the enemy. Is ultimately they're the reason I was here and I lost my foot in the first place. So not that I'm all about, it's not about revenge or anything, but
Revenge for the foot.
but yeah, it's given me more reason to stay here, I guess. Of course, you have the option to not go back if you have such an injury. No one's gonna say anything bad if you want to just go home and focus on recovering and get a sort of normal job afterwards. No one's gonna say anything against that, but it wasn't too much of a question, I guess. I had to explain it to my parents, who are not so they weren't so pleased with, firstly, with me losing my foot and being in the army. They didn't know.
Well, they didn't know until you told them you lost your foot.
Yeah. They knew I was here, sort of working, but they didn't know I was fighting in the army. So, yeah, I had to explain to my parents and apologize to my mother. So, yeah, I had to go through all that. But then when they came to Ukraine, they came to visit me and saw me in hospital, and I was able to talk to them and explain to them what I've been doing and what happened, and also explain why I wanted to go back as well, and to stay in Ukraine for treatment and not go back to the UK. So it was nice.
When you talk about the option of like just going back to normal life, saying, okay, that's enough war, like what do those thoughts look like for you at this point? Like we're in now the 5th year of the full-scale war, kind of talk of peace is kind of gone out the window. Do you start to look at a future beyond this war, or is that not helpful at this moment? Is that future in Ukraine or back home?
Yeah, the future now for me is here. I want to give more of my time to the army, to Azov, and to fighting here, and gain more experience and hopefully be more useful to the unit I'm serving with. And yeah, I just feel like I could go back home and go back to my normal job. I can actually do my old job with one leg. And of course, like, you think about all options, but for me, it's not really something I've seriously considered. I've just been focusing on recovering and getting back to work and staying here. You also get a lot more, people are a lot more understanding of your injury here as an amputee. It's unfortunately quite common here to see, and it's more than likely going to be related to serving in the armed forces here if you're missing a limb, if you're an amputee. So you have a lot more understanding everywhere you go here in Ukraine, whereas back in the UK, you don't have so much. It's obviously not as a common thing to see someone with an amputation or a prosthetic. So you have to kind of explain the situation, and then a lot of people are sort of shocked by the explanation. Then you have to explain some more to them. So
you haven't been back?
Yeah, I went back in December when I was discharged from hospital, but was still during the rehabilitation phase. It was like the first prosthetic you get. So I went back for about 3 weeks back to the UK over the Christmas period. So it was nice.
How is the UK understanding what's going on in the world and in Ukraine in general at the moment?
I think, unfortunately, it's not spoken about as much as it should be, particularly the Ukraine war. It's definitely fallen out of people's minds, and they're not, unless they're specifically looking for it in the news and they're trying to keep up to date with it. It's unfortunately not spoken about much at all, and there's a lot of reluctance for the government preparing for war, for NATO countries and Western countries preparing for war. A lot of people see it as fear-mongering, and the government sort of pushing people to to think about war more and it being a distraction, all this kind of stuff. But I think the biggest thing people forget is that you don't often get to choose when you go to war. You can be anti-war as much as you like, but another nation doesn't have that point of view, and you have to be able to defend yourself. It's like here in Ukraine, like this country didn't choose to go to war, but we're at war, and the country's had to adapt and fight this war, which is doing very well. And we have to realize that in the UK and in the West, that we don't have the luxury of deciding whether or not we want to go to war if another country decides they want to take something from us or indeed go to war with us. So we have to prepare ourselves for that by building up the military, but also having this mentality of wanting to defend your country. The mentality, I think, has to change, but it can change very quickly when you're under attack. We have the luxury at the moment in the UK and in the West of sort of being able to sit back and see all these other countries descending into larger scale conflicts.
Ukraine relied a lot on these Western donations and this Western help with training from the West, from European countries now. But now it's Ukraine that's the one that understands how to fight this war. How do you think this will play out in the next few years, this kind of relationship? And what's your message, I guess, for Western countries going into what looks like a pretty hot 21st century?
Yeah, I would say we have a great opportunity now to learn as much as we can from the war here in Ukraine and how it's being fought, which we are doing, but we need to implement this in our own armed forces back home as well. We need to actually properly implement what we're seeing here, not just kind of parts of it that we think are like nice and we can implement them, but like having a few drone operators attached to an infantry company. We need to see more like a whole platoon dedicated to drone operations, or a whole company in a battalion dedicated to drone operations, and really try and integrate all the lessons that have been learnt here, because they've been hard learned lessons. A lot of Ukrainians have been killed learning, adapting to the war as it changes, and we have the opportunity to avoid a lot of that if we're able to take seriously what we see here and seriously implement it. I know it's hard because it's hard to do something it's hard to do something before you actually see it firsthand, like what is needed. And I know like a lot of NATO countries are trying to integrate what they're learning here with their current sort of doctrine, but I think they could do a lot more before it's too late. It also allows them to, if we really properly start changing how we fight, we can be a lot more aggressive with our support towards Ukraine, because we can be a lot more confident in how we fight. If we were to enter the theater of war tomorrow with the guys, with all the sort of readily deployable military we have today, I think we would see, unfortunately, quite high losses in the beginning until we quickly changed our tactics to avoid that.
What are those most important lessons, do you think?
Changing the way we fight, not moving in large groups, respecting how the enemy is using drones and how their tactics are changing, and how quickly they are adapting also to the war, because of course it's not just us adapting to how we fight. The enemy is adapting, and that forces us to adapt, and it's going in this sort of like 3-4 month cycles, and it's going to be difficult to jump in from the outside to this ongoing cycle of 3-4 months. We're going to jump in with sort of bits of experience that we think we've learnt and integrated. We're going to jump into the middle of this ongoing war, and we'll have to learn very quickly to adapt. So yeah, it's using drones, communication through drones with guys on the ground, combining them into doctrine that we already have in the most effective way. So using them alongside infantry, alongside armor and all this kind of stuff. So it's very difficult to do on a large scale when if your military is not directly involved. But we are able to see what's happening. So hopefully if the time does come, we've learned enough to be able to jump in and minimize losses before we start getting into this proper cycle of constantly adapting to how we fight.
And what's next for you personally? You're starting a new job. Have you been out on positions yet since your injury, or do you plan to?
Yeah, I'm back with my unit now. I'm helping run the heavy drone team. It's like a heavy bomber unit. So I've been back for a couple of months working with the guys there. It's a fairly new team and we've had to learn a lot from the beginning, learn and implement our own SOPs and this kind of stuff. So it's been a lot of work and it continues to be a lot of work, but it's very enjoyable. For me, it's been, I like it a lot. I'm hoping to go back to position. I've just got a new foot. So it's like an upgrade to my last foot, which should allow me to wear armor and carry my weapon and carry weight and be able to move. Unfortunately, it is kind of an inconvenience having a prosthetic working on the front line, but it is possible and it has been done, and it's something I would like to do. I would like to return to the front. I feel like to give orders to guys on the front, you need to be able to go there yourself and see what's happening, because like I say, things are changing in this cycle, this like 3-4 month cycle, and even subtly things change, and you need to be able to experience what it's like on the ground, so you know how your guys can move, when they can move, what's restricting them, what the drone coverage is like, all this kind of stuff. So I think for the job, it's something I need to do, and also I would like to test myself and get back out on the front and see if I can still be useful with one leg.
Thank you for watching this video. Going forward, we're planning to bring you even more interviews from Ukraine's foreign fighters, top commanders, as well as experts and thought leaders, alongside all our regular coverage from the front line, news and investigations. As always, everything we do here at the Kyiv Independent is made possible not by billionaires, grants or governments, but by you, our viewers and readers. If you want to help support independent journalism in wartime Ukraine, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community by going to the link below. Thank you.